Hi Nico, thanks very much for your question, and I'll do my best to explain a few ideas that have changed over the last 30 odd years. But the reality is a lot of things actually have stayed the same. So let's first start by my first job in rugby league was with the Newcastle Knights, and also back in those days we had unlimited interchange. And I remember towards the end of my time at Parramatta in the end of 1998 that we were averaging about 42 interchanges a game. So we really didn't have to condition the players too much for cardiovascular metabolically. We had to really look at anaerobic tolerance, and a set of six in those days was approximately about 45 seconds. So we could actually drag players off, and I remember one classic incident where we were playing Penrith when I was with the Northern Eagles in 2000, and we had a player dragged from the opposition after 3 tackles. So he was only on the field for about less than 30 seconds. So when you consider that sort of elements, it obviously dictates fairly heavily towards a lot of repeat speed, a lot of power and conditioning. And I took a lot of this across to rugby when I first went across to Canterbury in 2003. Already Mike Anthony and other trainers had done a phenomenal job in developing a wonderful aerobic base with the squads in Canterbury and then into the Crusaders. But at the stage, the technical rules within rugby were so much that the number of phases before a penalty occurred or some sort of stoppage occurred wasn't that great. I think that's been seen a shift over the last few years where the rules at the breakdown have changed somewhat, and maybe technicalities have come back into the game where we didn't have to be as aerobically fit in the days when I first started back in 2003. I think that's changed quite a bit, so we have to be a lot fitter. The interesting thing is it's a great paradox in that the players that probably need the most conditioning are usually the biggest in the first place, so it's very difficult to give them extra running. So I think one of my biggest shifts over the years has been the utilisation of more off-feet conditioning and also circuits, and looking at that sort of elements to actually drive the metabolic process without actually having to spend too much time on feet extra running. We're still going to be fairly heavily conditioned as far as our VO2 grids are concerned, our Eurofit. Great article by Dan Baker a few years ago now, but that details probably the best I've ever read about the importance of those elements and how to program for them. They still underpin a lot of what I do as far as my training is concerned. But I think more and more so, I think the listening to the players has probably been an element of my career over the last probably 10 or 12 years, which has improved dramatically from when I first started. And also the belief in that the game is the best conditioner and the best test of condition as well. So obviously we can't play a regular full game every 2 or 3 days to get that sort of elements in our training, but we can replicate that with small-sided games, and we can also look at the demands placed on the player. Obviously, with the use of GPS metrics now, we've got good work-rest ratios that we can actually utilise as far as putting in place some of those activities, strongman activities as well, into circuits, and looking at going for, say, a worst-case scenario where we may have to continue for 3 minutes before a breakdown occurs, that we can actually stop and take a short rest. So utilising small-sided games is a key element, and I first learnt those elements from Brian Smith, Peter Sharp, and Brian Johnson back in my Parramatta days, back in 97, 98. So they've been a mainstay of my program all the way through. I think the other element that needs to be considered is the use of specific rugby activities and looking at the manipulation of work and rest periods within that. So if we're looking at a speed day associated with our rugby elements, we look at just 1 or 2 phases off a set piece and then stop and have a really slow, controlled walk back, reset, talk about it on the way back, and then fire it off again. If we're looking at more of a lactate tolerance conditioning session with the ball in hand and game specific, we want to try and play games that are shoulders on or two-handed tag or something like that. Elements such as two-ball touch, where we can have a ball played out for a number of phases that we determine, and then a coach will drop another ball back somewhere else on the field and then play on from that particular element there as well. So I've got plenty of rules for these. If you're interested, I can publish these as well. But I think they form the majority of the last team I worked with was the Houston SaberCats. And we showed a significant increase in our aerobic ability by playing more of these rugby-specific games in season. And we would have a speed day where we would element just first phase, second phase, and that would be finished. And then we'd play these 3 to 4 minute blocks, working up to 8 minutes we worked at, for the game where we looked at 3 tackles to make a breach. If we didn't get that breach, we had to then kick, and then the opposition would retrieve and play on, so it had to be a long kick. So we had elements of the kick chase, we had elements of trying to find a way through the defense, and then the opposition would take over, and they have 3 phases to make a breach. If you breach, you get an initial 3 tackles. So we can actually play this out. If the ball goes out, we have balls located along the sidelines, which we would basically play on. So we're eliminating the stoppage time with setting up for lineouts and restarts, but we actually want to maintain that continuity. We used to call it continuity touch. So I hope they've given you some indication. I'm more than happy to explain other elements, but I think I'm sure Dan Baker would be able to give you access to that document that he produced a few years ago now, and I'll also look through my games and see if I've got some footage of anything. If not, I'll just put the document in place and you can have a read. So thanks very much for the question. Really great to see people engaging a lot more in 2022, and I hope that continues for the rest of the year. Thanks very much. Bye.